So let me set the scene. I had about $1,000 sitting in a regular checking account, no high yield savings, no investing account, no Roth IRA. Just a checking account that was earning me literally nothing. And I mean nothing, like 0.01% interest, which on $1,000 is 10 cents a year. That's not a typo. 10 cents. And the thing is, I wasn't doing anything wrong on the surface. I wasn't blowing money on crazy stuff. I just didn't have a system. The money sat there. I felt okay about it. And that was basically it. That's the trap most people in their 20s fall into. You're not actively destroying your finances, but you're also not building anything. You're just floating. Here's what I want you to understand about that $1,000 moment. The number doesn't matter as much as the decision you make about it. Because what I eventually figured out is that the first move isn't about returns or investments or any of that. The first move is just making the money intentional, giving it a job. So what did I do? I moved it. That's literally it. I opened a high yield savings account. At the time, it was paying around 4 to 5%, and I moved that $1,000 over. Now, instead of earning 10 cents a year, I was earning somewhere around $40 to $50 a year on that same money without doing anything different. That's not life-changing on its own. But here's why it matters. First, it broke the inertia. I had to actually log in, open an account, and move money on purpose. That single action changed how I thought about my money. It stopped being money I have and started being money I'm managing. That mental shift is worth more than the interest. Second, it started a habit. Once I had an account that was actually doing something, I wanted to put more in it. I started looking at my spending differently. Not obsessively, not in a way that made me miserable, but I started asking, does this purchase move me forward or does it just disappear? And that question alone started changing my decisions. The reality is most people skip this step because it feels too small. Like, why bother moving $1? 0 when the interest is only 40 bucks. But you're not doing it for the 40 bucks. You're doing it because it's the first move in a system. And systems compound. Money compounds. But habits compound faster than either one. If I were you right now, today, that's the first thing I'd do. Whatever you have sitting in a basic checking account doing nothing, move it somewhere for it that at least pays you while it sits there. High yield savings account, it takes about 10 minutes to open. That's your first move. Chapter 2. The system I built and the mistakes I made first. Okay, so now let's talk about the part I don't see enough people being honest about, the mistakes. Because I didn't go from $1,000 to building real net worth in a straight line. I made some classic moves that set me back, and I want to walk you through them so you can skip them entirely. Mistake number 1. I invested before I had an emergency fund. This is where a lot of people mess up, and I get why. You learn about the stock market, you learn about compound interest, you hear that time in the market beats timing the market, and you go all in. I put a few $100 into a brokerage account before I had any real cash cushion, and then predictably something came up. Car repair, maybe $600. And because I had no emergency fund, I had two options: pull the money out of my investment account, possibly at a loss, or put it on a credit card. I put it on the credit card, and that credit card had a 22% interest rate. So now I'm paying 22% on debt while my investments are theoretically earning maybe 8 to 10% on average. That's not wealth building. That's running in the wrong direction. The order of operations matters. This is where people get themselves in trouble. They start at step 3 before they finish step 1. Mistake number 2. I had no idea what my actual net worth was. This sounds obvious, but think about it. Do you actually know your number right now? Most people in their 20s have a vague sense. I have some money, I have some debt, I think I'm okay. That's not knowing your number. That's hoping. Net worth is simple. Everything you own minus everything you owe. Your savings, your investments, your car value, minus your student loans, credit card debt, any other debt. That's it. When I actually sat down and calculated mine for the first time, it was negative, and that was uncomfortable to look at. But it was also clarifying because now I had a real target. Here's what the system looked like once I actually built it properly. Step 1 was a fully funded emergency fund. 3 to 6 months of actual living expenses sitting in that high yield savings account, not touched, not invested, just sitting there doing its job as a cushion. For me, that was somewhere around $6,000 to $8,000, depending on the month. Getting there took time. I was putting in $200, $300 a month. But once it was funded, I felt a completely different kind of financial stability. Like I could handle something going wrong without it destroying everything else I was building. Step 2 was eliminating high interest debt. And I mean high interest specifically, anything above 7 or 8%, I treated as a guaranteed return to pay off. If you've got a credit card at 20%, paying that off is the same as earning 20% on your money risk-free. You're not going to find that in the stock market consistently. So that came before aggressive investing every single time. Step 3, and this is where things started to actually compound, was the Roth IRA. I opened one. I started putting money in consistently, and I chose a simple index fund, not individual stocks, not crypto as my primary vehicle, a total market index fund. Because the reality is, most people who try to pick individual stocks underperform the market. Not because they're dumb, but because the market is hard. An index fund just buys a piece of everything and rides the whole thing up over time. At the time, the max contribution was $6,000 a year. That's $500 a month. I wasn't hitting that right away. I started with $100 a month, then $200. The point wasn't to max it immediately. The point was to start it, automate it, and let it run. And here's the math that made it real for me. If you put $200 a month into a Roth IRA starting at 23, and it earns an average of 8% annually, which is below the historical average of the S&P 500, by the time you're 55, you're looking at somewhere around $350,000 tax-free. On 200s a month, that's the kind of number that makes you want to automate it today and never think about it again. Chapter 3, where the real growth came from. Stacking the accounts okay. So this is the chapter where things actually started to move, because up to this point, emergency fund built, high interest debt gone, Roth IRA started. My net worth was growing, but slowly. Like I could see progress, but it didn't feel dramatic yet. And I think this is the phase where a lot of people get discouraged and either stop or start making weird decisions trying to speed things up. Here's what I want you to understand. The early stage of building net worth is supposed to feel slow. You're laying foundation. The growth that feels dramatic comes later, and it comes specifically because you didn't do anything stupid during the slow part. But there are real moves you can make during this phase to accelerate things, and this is where stacking the accounts becomes the strategy. The first thing is your 401k match, and this is non-negotiable. If your employer offers a 401k match and you are not contributing enough to get the full match, you are leaving free money on the table. I don't say that hyperbolically. It is literally free money. If your employer matches 4% of your salary and you're only contributing 2%, you are walking away from half of what they're willing to give you. Let me put a number on it. Say you make $45,000 a year. 4% of that is $1,500. If your employer matches dollar for dollar up to that amount, that's $1,800 extra per year going into your retirement account that costs you nothing. Over 30 years at 8% growth, that employer match alone compounds to somewhere around $200,000. From free money, this is the first account to stack before anything else. The second thing is where most people get the order wrong. Taxable brokerage versus just saving more. Once your emergency fund is set, your high interest debt is gone, and you're getting your full 401k match and contributing to your Roth IRA. The next layer is a taxable brokerage account. This is just a regular investing account, no contribution limits, no income restrictions, no rules about when you can take the money out. A lot of people in their 20s skip this because it doesn't have the tax advantages of a Roth IRA. And yeah, that's true. But here's the thing. A Roth IRA has a $7 annual contribution limit right now. If you've maxed that out and you still have money to invest, the brokerage account is the next best place for it. Same index funds, same long-term strategy, just without the tax shelter. And even if you haven't maxed your Roth yet, having a brokerage account for goals that aren't retirement, like buying a house in 7 to 10 years or building a bridge to early retirement, makes sense. The flexibility alone is worth it. The third thing, and this is where my net worth actually started jumping, was tracking it consistently. I know that sounds boring, but I started calculating my net worth every single month, not obsessively checking it, not refreshing my brokerage app every hour, just once a month sitting down and adding up the assets, subtracting the liabilities, writing down the number. And what happened was two things. First, watching the number go up, even slowly, became motivating in a way that abstract save for the future advice never was. When you can see that your net worth went from negative $4,000 to negative $500 to positive $2, zero to positive $6,000, it stops being theoretical. It becomes a game you actually want to win. Second, tracking forced me to confront lifestyle inflation before it happened. This is where people get themselves in trouble. They get a raise, their income goes up, and their spending goes up proportionally. So their net worth barely moves even though they're making more money. Tracking every month made me see that pattern clearly. If my income went up $500 a month and my net worth barely moved, I had to ask where that money actually went. The rule I gave myself was simple. Every time my income went up, at least half of that increase had to go toward net worth, savings, investments, debt payoff, something that moved the number. The other half I could do whatever I wanted with. That balance meant I wasn't living like a monk, but I also wasn't just inflating my lifestyle every time I got ahead. Now, here's the mistake a lot of people make at this stage. They start chasing returns. Their index funds are up 10% this year. They see someone on social media claiming 40% returns on options or individual stocks or some alternative investment, and they start moving money around trying to do better. I did a version of this. I bought a handful of individual stocks thinking I had figured something out. I hadn't. I underperformed the index. Classic story. The reality is boring works. A simple 3-fund portfolio. Total US market, international market, bonds, has beaten most active investors over 20-year periods, not because it's exciting, but because it's consistent and cheap. Low expense ratios, automatic diversification, no emotional decisions required. If you are in your 20s and you are investing consistently in low-cost index funds, you are already doing better of people who are actively trying to do better. Keep it simple. You do not need to overcomplicate this. Chapter 4. What your net worth should look like in your 20s. Okay, I want to address something that I get asked about a lot, and honestly something I used to obsess over myself. The comparison question. Like, what should my net worth actually be at 23, 25, 27? Am I behind? Am I on track? What's normal? Here's my honest answer. The benchmarks floating around online are mostly useless for people early in their 20s, and I'll tell you why. The most commonly cited rule is that by 30, you should have 1 times your salary saved. So if you make $50,000 a year, you should have $50,000 saved by 30. And that sounds reasonable until you realize that a huge percentage of people in their early 20s are either in school, just got out, carrying student loans, or working entry-level jobs that don't pay enough to build savings quickly. The math just doesn't work the same way for everyone. So instead of giving you a number to hit, let me give you a framework that actually makes sense based on where you are. If you're 22 to 24 and your net worth is 0 or slightly negative, you're not behind. This is actually a totally normal starting point, especially if you have student loans. What matters at this stage is that you have a direction. Emergency fund started, no high interest consumer debt, some version of retirement contribution happening, even if it's small. The number itself matters less right now than the system being in place. If you're 25 to 27, the goal I'd aim for is getting your net worth solidly positive and climbing, not a specific dollar amount, just consistently moving in the right direction. For me, getting to a positive net worth after accounting for all my debt felt like a massive milestone. It meant the assets I was building had officially outpaced what I owed. That's the real psychological shift in your mid-20s. You go from treading water to actually swimming forward, a rough target some people use. By 25, try to have at least $10,000 to $15,000 in net assets, savings plus investments minus debt. That's achievable on a modest income if you're being intentional, and it gives you a real foundation to build from. But again, this is a rough guideline, not a judgment. If you're 28 to 30, this is where the compounding starts to show up in real ways. By this point, if you've been consistent, Roth IRA contributions for several years, 401k with employer match, emergency fund intact, no high interest debt, you might be looking at a net worth somewhere between $30,000 and $80,000 depending on your income and cost of living. That range is wide because life is wide. But the people at the higher end of that range almost universally got there the same way. They started earlier than they thought they needed to. They kept it consistent even when the amounts felt small. And they didn't blow up their progress with big lifestyle inflation or avoidable debt. Here's the rhetorical question I want you to sit with. What is one financial decision you are making right now that your future self is going to thank you for? Not a big dramatic move, not quitting your job to start a business, not going all in on one investment, just one boring, consistent, intentional decision, because that is what net worth is built on. Not the big swings, the boring consistency repeated for years. And the flip side of that, what is one thing you are doing right now that your future self is going to have to clean up? The subscription you forgot about, the credit card balance you keep meaning to pay off, the money sitting in a checking account earning nothing. These aren't catastrophic things, but they add up in the wrong direction over time, the same way good habits add up in the right direction. The gap between people who build wealth in their 20s and people who don't is almost never income. It is almost always intention. The person making $42,000 a year, who has a system, tracks their number, and stays consistent will outbuild the person making $75,000 a year who has no structure and lets lifestyle inflation eat every raise. That's not motivational fluff. That's just math.